Hey, what's poppin'? Good morning, everybody. We're out here in the sunny Central Valley, the San Juan Key Valley of Southern California, biologizing the California Aqueduct here near a town called Tutman, California, which is a part of California that not too many people outside of California know about. This is kind of like the underground of California, if you will. I mean, you know, if the major cities like LA and San Francisco, if those are considered the mainstream, then areas like this are basically the underground that supports that mainstream culture. But yeah, just like I mentioned a few moments ago, we are standing here at the banks of the California Aqueduct, which is an aqueduct system that stretches about 444 miles all the way from northern and central California down into Southern California. Yeah, this build project started back in, I think, 1963. And I think they're still working on it today, or at least like most of the major sections have been completed and everything. But yeah, so it basically drains the northern central valley, like near where the delta starts. Matter of fact, this aqueduct starts at this place called Clifton Court Forebay, which is basically off the San Joaquin River before it terminates into the delta, grabs that water and sends it all the way down here to Southern California, feeding you know, places like Santa Barbara, Castaic, ending all the way in Silverwood Lake, which is basically on the border of where, you know, the desert transition areas where the mountains kind of turn into the desert. Yeah, and so this thing is basically responsible for the modern civilization that calls those areas home today. Hence why I call areas like this in the Central Valley kind of like the underground parts of the state, you know, the parts of the state that not too many people realize. Basically like the infrastructures that have been built, setting the platform for everybody else to live their bougie lifestyles in the city. You know, I like to sometimes tell my friends that California is kind of like the new Rome in the world, you know, and for many reasons. And for one of those reasons is, for one, it's a Mediterranean climate, just like how Rome was, and not just Rome too, ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, areas like that that surround the Mediterranean. It's basically just like a really good climate for people to survive, because, you know, you ain't have to deal with like snow or anything like that. You have to worry about getting prepared for like the winter. Basically has a nice enough climate to where you can kind of sit around and think about other stuff to do. I mean, you think about Rome, you know, they created an aqueduct because they were running out of water to support all the people that they had. I mean, makes sense why California kind of did the same thing, especially Southern California, because Southern California is much more significantly dry than in Northern California. I'm just trying to look at things in the perspective of an ecologist. So I'm trying to think of, you know, how this area was before this aqueduct was built here, and how things might have changed ever since they built the aqueduct. Not how things might have changed, how things did change. And basically kind of get a snapshot of how this area is looking today, as far as, you know, the assemblage of biological specimens that call this place home, or at least exploit the resources that this aqueduct has now provided since its inception, or since its construction. All right, so now looking to my west, out in the background, you got those hills over there. That's part of a geologic formation known as the Valley Formation, which was essentially created by the San Andreas Fault, as those two tectonic plates, the Pacific and the North American plate, were rubbing up against each other, you know, creating that strain and tension, lifting up big slabs of sedimentary rock, which have formed these hills, which are all around the flanks of the San Joaquin Valley. And so basically the valley is kind of like a basin, and naturally, all the waters that would flow into this basin from seasonal flooding during the spring would basically create like large lake systems out here. And then every year, presumably, those would all get dried up, and the salts and minerals that would be left behind were alkali, or basic in chemistry. And that little bit of chemistry basically dictates the quality of the soil, and the quality of the soil dictates what plant life you would find around there. And that plant life would basically invite the specific communities of wildlife, of animal life. But that's what happened naturally. Obviously today it's a different story. Right there you see we got a bunch of oil trucks that are coming in and out, bringing in probably crude oil, coming out with refined oil. I don't know, I'm not an oil engineer or anything like that. I don't know what really goes on over there, but there we got that refinery. I mean, we got oil pumps and everything like that. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize is one of the very first monetary booms that California had after the gold rush was the oil rush, essentially. They found a lot of oil in California. There's still a lot of oil in California. and we still pumping it up. But like I said, this is like the underground of California. This is what, a lot of people outside of California don't really realize about this state. But yeah, no, so back to the aqueduct, they just basically installed a river on the western side of the valley, and it basically provided water to an area that historically has never had like consistent water like this before. But if you notice, you got concrete lined banks here, so this water is heavily confined, and it's basically not allowed to leach or basically influence any of the surrounding habitat like a natural river would do. And I know at first glance, because of the concrete lined channels and all these like pump bridges going across it and everything like that, it looks pretty barren. From a naturalist point of view, it might look pretty bleak. But at the same time, from an ecologist point of view, there are resources here, and there are going to be forms of wildlife that will take advantage of those resources, wildlife and plant life. So with that being said, let's see what they got here. All right, let's start on this side, which is basically on the eastern side of the levee of the banks of the aqueduct. Right up here next to the adjacent vegetation community, I'm at least seeing 2 species of plants here that are good representatives of the dominant vegetation that will be found out here naturally. So I mentioned earlier that, the natural soils of this area would be very alkaline, or, high up on the pH scale, pH above 7 and everything. And those alkaline soils are very favorable to plants within the family Amaranthaceae, or the saltbush family. And we have 2 species of saltbush that I'm gonna talk about right now. So the first species of saltbush we got right here, and try not to stick myself on this barbed wire. We got right here, this is Atriplex Polycarpa. But yeah, you notice it's got like these kind of like small leaves, as opposed to the other one over there. This is Atriplex lentiformis, or the I think it's called the big leaf saltbush, but it's got much more broader leaves, much more wider leaves. But yeah, those 2 species of plants are a good example of evolutionary radiation, where you have multiple species, originating from the same common ancestor, essentially, resulting in 2 species that have 2 different lifestyles, but able to live in the same area, essentially. Okay, just walking along the banks here, and I'm getting this smell, and this smell does remind me of the California Delta. And obviously that makes sense, because this is where that water is coming from. But yeah, on these banks, you can see that when they constructed this thing, they basically laid out these concrete segments, or these concrete slab segments, and you notice that there's these cracks in between those segments, and these cracks will provide some habitat for some plants. And one of those plant species right here, unsurprisingly, is Atriplex polycarpa. And this is a little bit unsurprising, because it's a native plant, and a lot of the native vegetation community out there, this species comprises a lot of that. So it is a little unsurprising to see it, kind of faring well within the crack systems of the banks of this aqueduct. Oh, and another thing that I'm noticing, that just like other river systems, just like every river system, you kind of get this zonation that occurs along the banks. I mean, you got up here where it's, concrete, dry, not a lot going on. And then once you get closer to the shore, you kind of get these, horizontal bands of vegetation that take advantage of the microclimates within those bands, depending on the proximity to the water. And right here with this Atriplex polycarpa, we can see that this is an unsurprising upland example, a plant that doesn't need that much water, essentially, compared to other plants like this one right here that's closer to the water. Now I think, I'm not sure really, but I think this is in the genus Eclipta. I think the common name of this is false daisy. I don't have any flowers to really confirm an identification or anything like that, but I think this is what it is. So yeah, I think this is Eclipta Prostrata in the Asteraceae family. And I'm not sure, if there are any other seasoned botanists who know this area, who know exactly what this plant is, please let me know. But yeah, it's in the Asteraceae family, which is the daisy or sunflower family. And it's a common plant found in many moist areas, areas near rivers and lake systems, freshwater systems and everything like that. And it's unsurprising to see the zonation where you have this Eclipta right here closer to the water's edge, and then you go more upland and you have this Atriplex. So another thing I noticed along the crafts of these concrete slabs is we got these ant species right here. So I'm pretty sure that these ants are Solenopsis xyloni, or the southern fire ant, which is actually a native species of fire ant. There's the introduced species Solenopsis invicta, which is wreaking havoc across everywhere in the United States, you know, stinging little kids in their front lawns and stuff like that. But anyway, this is the native species, which apparently the sting isn't as painful. And I guess, you know, since it's a native species, nowhere near as destructive to local habitats and everything. Yeah, but it kind of makes sense to me why they're living in these crack systems. You know, the cracks themselves provide a form of shelter, you know, away from anything, any predators that might want to pick them off. I'm pretty sure the natural predator of these ants would be the coast horned lizard or Phrynosoma coronatum. But those, you know, they've probably been extirpated from this area with the construction of this aqueduct system and everything. So now these ants kind of get a safe haven, especially living in the cracks on the banks of this aqueduct. Okay, and now looking into the inundated zone, the zone that's covered up by water. I'm sorry if the light is pretty shitty, my bad. But we got this some type of aquatic vegetation, some sort of aquatic weed. I'm not sure exactly what species it is, but if I was to take a guess, I'm pretty sure this is Stuckenia. Stuckenia is a species of pondweed, very common species of pondweed. Likes all sorts of aquatic ecosystems and can tolerate brackish ecosystems too, which are, you know, aquatic ecosystems that are a mixture of salt and fresh water. And that makes sense because a lot of this water is coming from the California Delta, where it does have influence, tidal influence from the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is Stuckenia. Pretty sure. Stuckenia looks, to me at least, a lot like grass. And of course, you got that stuff right there lining the concrete floor. That's probably some species of cyanobacteria, maybe Anabena. I'm not sure, but it's definitely cyanobacteria. And that probably makes up the majority of the sediment cover in this whole aqueduct system. I wish I could show you what it looks like underneath there, like way at the bottom. But you know, that would be dangerous. I think when they opened this aqueduct, it was pretty much, you know, green light on anybody can take advantage of it, because, you know, this is a public project. You know, it's public water source and everything like that. That's why I'm allowed to be here. But yeah, I guess people would like float down this thing, and I guess, you know, as people started dying, they ended up, you know, closing it off to swimming and everything like that. You know, there are a bunch of signs all around here lining this aqueduct saying, you know, don't go into the water, you could drown. Oh my God, I had no idea that I would see this here. Wow. Oh, please don't swim away. Please don't swim away. I got you. It's good. It's good. It's good. Oh my God. Look what we've got here. Let me get this guy settled real quick. Oh, I never would have thought. Okay, so he's a little calm right now because he's been swimming in that cold water. I wonder if he just went down to get a drink and then just fell in somehow. But he's kind of cold right now. See, you wouldn't expect to see things like this here at the aqueduct, right? I wonder if this thing came down to get a drink and then accidentally fell in, which is why they have these signs here saying, you know, stay away. But yeah, this is Lampropeltis jatula, the California king snake in the family Colubridae, which is the largest family of snakes in existence right now. He's a little pissed off. I get it, because I caught it and everything like that, because I want to show my viewers, you know, some of the organisms that can be found here in the California aqueduct. So this species comes in a whole bunch of different types of color morphs. Like this is obviously the black and white banded one, but they also come in a stripe form. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, it seems to be not totally black and white, rather than, you know, it's kind of like faded black and like maybe a little bit of yellowish. What I'm trying to say is that there's a high degree of variation in color patterns within this single species of king snake. Definitely one of the more prettier snakes here in California, just my opinion. And an interesting feature about the genus Lampropeltis is that they specialize in feeding on other snakes. And these guys in particular love eating rattlesnakes in the genus Crotalus. Now look at it move. Oh, and it's getting a little aggressive, shaking its tail. So rattlesnakes aren't the only ones that shake its tail. Move slow so I can talk about you. But yeah, look at that. Lampropeltis jatula, the California king snake. And that's a big one too. That one's like, got to be at least 3.5 feet long. I guess I'm gonna go ahead and do it a favor and put it in a spot that's got a little bit more cover, so, you know, a hawk doesn't pick it off or anything like that. So let's go ahead and put it away. All right, go ahead, go, crawl into the bushes, go. Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous creature we have here today. And of course, living in the modern age, it's not unlikely to see introduced vegetation. Right here, we have Salsola tragus, the infamous tumbleweed. This plant is a nuisance like everywhere it has been introduced, basically sucking up all the water, which is what it does, naturally from where it's from, which is basically in the Eurasian steppe deserts and everything. When it gets a rainy season over there, and you know, in the short amount of time that it gets rain over there, these things suck up water really, really fast. So they try to outcompete other plants essentially that are around them to try to grab as much water as they can. And when they're introduced here in North America, you can imagine the damage that they do, taking away water resources that would be normally exploited by the native vegetation and everything. And then when they soak up all that water, when the rainy season goes away, they dry up, form into a ball, and break loose from their main stem and tumble around the landscape, dispersing their seeds. Very ingenious way of reproduction. Very, very ingenious way of dispersal, I must say. But, you know, in places where they've been introduced, very, very hazardous. I mean, they can clog up freeways. They spend millions of dollars trying to get rid of dead tumbleweeds on the freeways out here all the time, every year. And unsurprisingly, it does well out here because it is also in the family Amaranthaceae, which is the same family that those native saltbushes are. So it's probably highly tolerant of alkaline soils. And it's doing pretty well out here, living in these cracks on these concrete slabs next to this aqueduct. Salsola tragus, infamous tumbleweed. Right there we got Geocosix californianus in the Cuculidae family, getting dived by those cliff swallows. Undoubtedly just coming over here to the water's edge of the aqueduct to get something to drink. And those cliff swallows really don't like it, huh? Cuculidae, or the Cuculiformes order too, which is the family of cuckoos, and this is probably the most common cuckoo out here in California. I think there's only one other cuckoo species that I know of out here in California, the yellow-billed cuckoo, which is endangered. Look at that behavior right there, though. Okay, now sitting underneath one of the many bridges that are crossing this aqueduct. Now I'm trying to keep my voice down because there's a lot of birds over here, and birds don't really like when people talk. They tend to get a little, you know, like a little antsy and, you know, anxious and stuff like that. So trying to keep my voice down just a little bit to not really freak any of these birds out, even though me talking right now is probably freaking the hell out of these birds. Anyway, you can see up here, up along the upper, like the ceiling of this bridge, you have a lot of these mud structures, and a lot of these mud structures are formed by two specific animals that have exploited this type of microhabitat here on these bridges that cross the California aqueduct. The first one are these big mud houses that were created by a bird species, Petrochelidon pyranota, otherwise known as the cliff swallow. And we're kind of late in the season right now, but you can see how many there are along this one particular bridge. So throughout the spring, they'll be nesting in these type of areas, and they gather up mud and other constituents that come with the mud, mix it with the saliva, and create these mud nests where they, you know, are pretty much protected from many predators that would feed on them. Now, the other mud structures right here are these smaller ones that were created by an insect, specifically a hymenopteran, or a wasp species, and more specifically a sphesid, or a wasp within the family Sphecidae, or threadwaist wasps. Now, I believe that the sphesid species that made these mud nests are Scalifron saematarium, otherwise known as the yellow mud dauber, I think. Hopefully I get to see a Scalifron so I can take a video and show it. I see a couple of them flying over there. They're kind of far. Yeah, you see, I don't know if you can see those little wasps. Hopefully I can get up close to them and show you what they look like up close. But what Scalifron do is, yeah, they build these mud tubes, these mud cases and everything, and they go out and they parasitize other arthropods, particularly spiders. So they'll grab spiders, paralyze them, stick them into one of these tubes, and lay an egg on it, and then that egg would hatch, eat the spider, and then out comes a brand new adult Scalifron. rustica, aka the barn swallow. Now, unlike those cliff swallow nests that we was looking at earlier, these guys are a little bit more solitary when it comes to nesting. It seems like it's building its nest right now, so it's getting ready to nest. It looks like it's lining, doing the final touches of it, lining it with feathers so it's a nice soft bed for the chicks to grow up. Notice I'm trying to be very quiet because if I was to talk really loud, it would get freaked out. It would basically throw off its normal behavior. I ain't trying to do that. Yeah, Hirundo rustica, the barn swallow, family Hirundini. There we go. There it is. Scelephron cemeterium. Yellow or black and yellow mud dauber, and it looks like it's gathering up mud to make more of those mud chambers that you saw underneath that bridge earlier. Sphaecidae, which is the family of thread-waisted wasps. Many of them parasitoids on spiders. All right, I'm seeing some little itty-bitty fish in the water right there, and I kind of want to know what they are. Let's try to get them. Okay, so there it is, and I'm not sure exactly what it is. If I was to take a guess, I would say that this is a baby striped bass, Moroni saxatilis, and the only reason I say that is because of those longitudinal stripes going down the side of his body. But in all honesty, I really don't know what species this is. But there are thousands of these along the banks of this California aqueduct system. Also, I did notice that it does have two dorsal fins. It looks like it has a spiny dorsal ray and a soft dorsal ray. So that tells me it is a neoteleost. But hopefully I get to figure this out and tell you exactly what it is. Also strewn along the aqueduct, they have these flotation cables, which in the event somebody does fall in, there's at least something for you to grab on. And then you can basically pull yourself to one of these ladders and hopefully save your own life. Okay, so there you have it. There's my time here in the California Aqueduct. I hope you enjoyed me talking about this place. This place is very special and near and dear to all the Californians, especially in Southern California. Not so much in Northern California, but definitely Southern California. That's all my time for today. I hope you enjoyed my little gallivant around this particular section of the California Aqueduct out here near lovely, beautiful Tupman, California, amongst the oil fields and oil rigs and other remnant patches of native vegetation that has survived the scarification of the Anthropocene. But hey, even though this is a man-made structure, a gigantic, massive behemoth of a man-made structure, it's still, you know, with its place here in the local ecology has pretty much created its own type of ecology. And we got to see examples participating in that particular ecology today. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed my time here. I hope you learned something. And just remember, if you ever do come out here to this part of town and want to take advantage of the aqueduct, because there is pretty good fishing here. You know, you can catch striped bass, carp, largemouth bass, many of the common sport fish species that can be found. You know, just be careful because the current here is pretty fast. If you fall in, you're going to get carried down a ways, and hopefully you have enough sense to grab onto one of those floating ropes in order to save yourself. You know, try to limit the amount of dumb that you have in your life is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, yeah, thanks again for watching this video. I appreciate you. I will continue to post more in the future, even though I'm not consistent. I apologize for that. But you know, I'm gonna do what it do. So with that being said, keep your decisions scientific. Stay away from all the gimmicks. I'm Ichabod Slice. Peace up, peace out, learn something.